Nobody announced it. Nobody logged it. Nobody issued a statement. A senior official from the Department of Justice walked into a federal prison and met with Ghislaine Maxwell. And within days of that meeting, two things happened that cannot be explained by coincidence. Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security facility, and every leak coming out of the Epstein investigation stopped overnight. This is the visit they didn't want you to notice. Let's establish what we know. The official who made that visit was not a random mid-level bureaucrat. This was a deputy attorney general with a specific history, Trump's former personal attorney, someone with direct lines to the top of the current administration, someone whose presence in a federal prison visiting the most infamous co-conspirator in the Epstein case is not a routine check-in. No press release preceded it. No public log documented it. No formal statement followed it. The visit was not disclosed through standard channels. It surfaced through reporting, not through transparency. And by the time it became public, the damage or the arrangement, depending on how you look at it, had already been done. Because here's what happened next. Within days of that meeting, Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred. Not to a different cell, not to a different wing, to a minimum security prison. The official explanation was routine administrative processing, the kind of transfer that happens every day in the federal system for procedural reasons that have nothing to do with anything, except the timing. Maxwell had been sitting in a high-security facility since her conviction. She had been there through multiple administrations, through the ongoing Epstein investigations, through the congressional hearings, through the document releases, and then, within days of an unannounced visit from a senior DOJ official with personal ties to the current president, she was moved somewhere considerably more comfortable. Now let's talk about the leaks, because for months before that visit, information had been moving. Internal DOJ memos, partially redacted documents, names that weren't supposed to surface yet, details about the investigation that hadn't been formally released, all of it finding its way into the press through the channels that information travels when people inside an institution want the public to know something the institution is trying to hide. Leaks like that don't happen by accident. They happen when people inside the system believe the official process has failed, and the only remaining tool is exposure. They happen when investigators, attorneys, or officials decide that the public's right to know outweighs the institutional pressure to stay quiet. They happen when someone inside the building looks at what's being buried and decides they can't stay silent. And then the visit happened. And then Maxwell moved. And then the leaks stopped. Overnight. Not gradually. Not one by one as sources got nervous. Overnight. The flow of information that had been building for months, the drip of documents, the anonymous sourcing, the background conversations with reporters, all of it went silent at the same time. That kind of synchronized silence doesn't happen organically. It happens when something changes in the environment, when a signal gets sent, when people who were talking suddenly understand that talking has consequences. What was the signal? The visit, the transfer. The combination of the two happening within days of each other, without announcement, without explanation, without any official acknowledgement that anything unusual had occurred. Representative Moskowitz laid out the sequence in a congressional hearing with the kind of precision that made everyone in that room go quiet. He didn't speculate. He didn't allege. He listed events in chronological order and let the timeline speak for itself. The Epstein discharge petition vote was coming. Congress was preparing to force a release of the files. The White House privately described that effort as a hostile act. Republicans on the Rules Committee voted against the release, then got hammered by their own base for that vote, then refused to return to the committee. Congress left a day early, and in the middle of all of that political chaos, the unannounced prison visit, the transfer, the silence. Moskowitz asked the question nobody in that room wanted to answer. Why are we spending this much political capital to keep this list from coming out? Why is passing a discharge petition to release the Epstein files being called a hostile act by the White House? Who exactly is being protected, and why does protecting them require this much institutional machinery? Nobody answered. Because answering those questions in that room on that record, with those cameras rolling, would require admitting something that everyone present already understood. The Epstein case has never really been about Epstein. Epstein is dead. His crimes are documented. His conviction is on record. What's not on the record, what has never been on the record despite years of investigations, multiple jurisdictions, and thousands of pages of FBI interview reports, are the names of the people he trafficked victims to. Those names exist. Victims confirm they gave them to investigators. The FD-302 reports, documenting those conversations, are in FBI possession. At least 20 individuals are named in those reports. A royal prince, a Hollywood producer, multiple billionaires, senior government officials, a former politician. Not one of them has been charged. Not one has been publicly named by law enforcement. And every time the machinery of government gets close to releasing that information, something happens. A deal gets made. A visit gets arranged. A transfer gets processed. And the leaks stop. Maxwell knows things. Maxwell knows things. That has always been the assumption, the fear, the reason her case generated more public attention than almost any other conviction in recent memory. She was not just a participant in Epstein's operation. She was an architect. She recruited. She managed. She was present for things that Epstein's other associates were not present for, which means her cooperation, or her silence, is worth something to specific people in specific positions. The question that the prison visit raises is not whether a conversation happened. The question is what that conversation was about. What was offered? What was exchanged? What understanding was reached between a senior DOJ official and the woman who knows more about Epstein's client list than almost anyone still alive? We don't have answers to those questions. What we have is the sequence: visit, transfer, silence. In that order, within days of each other, without explanation. In any other context, that sequence would be called leverage. The application of quiet pressure to achieve a specific outcome without leaving a paper trail that could later be used as evidence. You don't need to threaten someone explicitly when the message is already clear. A transfer to minimum security communicates everything that needs to be communicated, and the silence that follows communicates the rest. The survivors who cooperated with investigators, who gave names, who sat across from FBI agents and told the truth about what happened to them, they are watching this. They watched the discharge petition get blocked. They watched Congress leave early. They watched the unannounced visit and the transfer and the silence. And they are drawing the same conclusions that anyone watching this sequence would draw, that the system protecting the names on that list is not failing. It is working exactly as designed. The visit happened. Maxwell moved, the leak stopped, and somewhere in the gap between those three facts is the answer to why the most important names in the Epstein case have remained protected through every administration, every investigation, and every congressional hearing for the past 2 decades. The silence isn't empty. It never was. It is the sound of a system doing what systems do when the truth gets too close. It holds,